You guys, welcome to another episode of Soft Rebellion. My name is Ntatu. Thank you so much for joining me. So I wanted to finish my thought process on the previous episode about being in my villain era. I mean, I didn't label it like that previously, but that's the message I was trying to communicate. You know, that I'm abandoning this savior complex that really I blame my friends for. In all honesty, though, I do think it always existed. But obviously, it was amplified when my friends saved me. And I say this, which sounds almost like an exaggeration, but I promise you it isn't, because they really did save me. And you know, sometimes they are so confused and they'll ask me about what they did or whatever, but they don't know how showing up consistently and lovingly brought me out of the spiral or the trance that I was in, this spell that, you know, my previous partner put me under. I wasn't even aware at the time, but I remember him trying to isolate me from everyone I knew. He tried to isolate me from my family, you know, from my friends, everyone, including work. And how he would do it was introduce doubt. It would start as if it's like an innocent insecurity, even cute, you know, to say, oh, but you're traveling to KZN. What if that guy tries to like make a move on you or whatever. And it would gradually grow into this full-on rage where I suddenly consider the possibility of not even traveling to KZN. But obviously I couldn't do that because that was my bread and butter. That was my business. And if there's one thing I learned about life is to never depend on anyone. Not for my own financial livelihood. Like, absolutely not. And I'd seen how bad he was with managing money. Like, he'd get 100K that month, and before the month ends, he wouldn't have a dime to buy bread, and I'd have to do groceries for him and his kids, you know. And I just thought, oh, he's so reckless, and there's no way I could rely on this person for my own survival, for my own provision, you know. So I had to work, but obviously it was something that he was really uncomfortable about, especially when I had to travel, and he would complain and start insinuating that, oh, I would sleep with, you know, my partners in KZN or whatever, which wasn't the case, but it was there, you know. But that wasn't the only aspect. I remember him trying to cause a rift with my mom as well. You know how you obviously tell your partner everything, but instead of actually just finding reason or, you know, laughing about something trivial, he would always amplify it and make it bigger than what it needed it to be. You know, eventually I saw that, no, man, this guy is really trying to divide me from my family, you know. Obviously, at the time, I was really, really anxious and had my own shame. I carried my own shame about not working, not being able to support my mom and send money home. All of a sudden, the roles were reversed and I was living at home for free. Something I'd never been in a position to, like, something I'd never been in before. And so I was really, really insecure about that. So as he was busy fueling this division, it just sounded like it made sense to me, and I carried even more shame, you know, and I wanted to hide myself even more from my mom and from home. And that's how he managed to cause that rift there. But I think then my friends became the last line of defense, and that's why I care about friendship so much, you guys. And I mean, I think some things you aren't able to discuss with your family, right? You aren't able to go into details, at least not my family, because that's not how I grew up. Like, I didn't grow up with a very close relationship with my mom where we could talk about everything. Relationships were a very taboo thing, and I think even at that time, talking about dating Jay was just still a taboo. But I think she had knowledge of the fact that I may have been dating, because I remember just a year before we traveled to the Eastern Cape, and I was driving an SUV which the first boyfriend I dated had borrowed me, but we then broke up. Today I'm like airing my dirty laundry. So I'm driving this SUV home to the Eastern Cape, and the guy and I had swapped cars. My mom didn't think much of it because I used to have a best friend who worked at this dealership, or who worked for the car manufacturers, and she had a similar car, or she could always get a similar car at work. That's the story we told. But I think my mom knew. So that's the guy I think she knew about, because she would hear stories, and Papi would also tell her stories about the guy and I. Anyway, it wasn't something that we could speak about openly because we just didn't have that kind of relationship. Never mind that now she wants me to get married and she wants grandchildren. So then my friends became the last line of defense. Like I said, this guy had succeeded to isolate me from everything I knew. And now I saw that he was trying to cause a division between my friends and I. In the beginning, it would start off as, hey, Usma, I am tanned Usma. And then eventually be like, but why are you friends with a guy? Hey, lento bukiangi, understand? And that's when I was like, no, surely there's something wrong here, because there is no way. If you know anything about my friend, he is love personified. And for you to badmouth him like that, I knew that you were the problem, And I remember he'd continue just saying nasty things, and every time I would see his smile, I obviously wouldn't mention those things, but he would just speak love over me. He would just be so excited to see me. He would listen attentively, and he would just understand and see me. And every time I'd compare those interactions with Simpiwe's, I saw the stark contrast, and I thought, no man, this is what love feels like. This is what home feels like. Not what this guy is trying to teach me, not this thing that he's trying to preach. And another thing, guys, he was a minister at church. It was a big thing at church. I don't know what they call it in his church. And I remember he would wake up every morning at like 5 a.m. or whatever the time was, and he would pray with his kids. They would like wake up and they would pray. Also in the evening, they'll also pray around the same time. Like, he was just that staunch Christian, devoted father who lived with his kids. So if I were to ever come out and say this guy did 1, 2, 3, no one would believe me. I thought no one would believe me because he's an upstanding citizen, and on the outside it seems like everything is going well for him, that he's got everything figured out, and I'm just this young girl who's recently lost a job, and people would probably think that I was, after him for money or whatever, because that's the idea when someone is in an age gap relationship, right? Whereas the truth couldn't be far from, the reality couldn't be far from that, right? So I knew I had I had no chance whatsoever of ever being believed. But of course my friends did believe me, and that validated me enough. Like, that felt like, okay, this is where I'm loved, and every time I would compare the two, how Simpiwe would, treat me, how he'd speak to me, how he'd speak about people as well, compared to how my friends did it, I thought, no man, this is what love is. I don't have to find it in a man or in this romantic partnership situation, because my friends are that. And I promise you, it's that very same love or loving relationship that gave me courage to finally walk away from Simpiwe, because I was like, he doesn't love me. He just wants to control me. This is not what love is. This is not what love looks like. And this is certainly not how I want to feel about myself, because every time, in order for Simpiwe to feel better about himself, I needed to feel the opposite. He needed to put me down or put other people down in order for him to feel better, to feel powerful. I needed to be less than. And I just thought, this is not right, But anyway, the way my friends showed up, like I said, is exactly how I vowed. I suppose I don't even remember making this vow, but silently maybe I made the vow to always show up like that for people, and that's why I am on the extreme side of things. When I love my people, I love to the extreme side. If there's anything, like if they're going through the most, I'm ready to just, make whatever sacrifices for them to feel accommodated, to be comfortable, to be supported. I put aside whatever for me to be there. I don't always get it right, obviously. And I feel like actually there's a lot of pushing things under the rug, which tends to happen in my friendships. And I don't like, because that eventually leads to so much build up and eventually a breakup. And I don't want that. But yeah, I do tend to put some of those personal differences aside just to show up for people and be supportive and whatnot. But I realize how all consuming that is. And sometimes it does come at my expense. And so going forward, I'm going to be doing less of that. And it's so uncomfortable because for the longest time, I've prided myself about being a good friend. And I think this is where it comes from. I always took pride in being the loving friend, the one who's supportive, and thing is, I enjoy it too. It's not that I make all these sacrifices and big gestures without finding joy in them. They make me happy too. It's something that I love, but recently I haven't really found joy in it, or I felt like I'm depleted. My cup is not being filled. The cliche saying, but I also think the scales are not balancing, man. Like, I just feel like sometimes I do it to such an extent that I betray myself, that there's a betrayal of self there, or that I forgo so many of my discomforts for the sake of showing up for people, that it feels like self-neglect, so I don't want to do that anymore. And that's why I'm saying I'm in my villain era. Like, I'm in my selfish era. I'm in my putting me first era, like prioritizing myself first era, I don't know what that's gonna look like, but I think it's necessary for me to do this, That way I don't feel disgruntled or whatever when things don't work out my way, or I don't act out of turn and end up causing hurt to the very people that I love, That way I also don't feel like, oh, I'm betraying myself or people are betraying me, I remember when I used to be such a carefree person, right? Before this whole shenanigan, I remember like in varsity, a friend of ours was getting married and we used to be close. We were quite close, but she also had another friend group that she was quite close with. So when her fiance proposed, she let it slip. I don't know if she really intended for this or felt pressured or whatever the case was, that we would be her bridesmaid. And obviously that's something you get excited about, because at the time, not many people get married, let alone you being a bridesmaid to your friends, But how the wedding is coming close and nothing is happening, no one is saying anything, but she's gone ahead and planned, bridesmaids things with her other friends. And I understood it, Shem. Like, honestly, I wasn't touched at all, because I knew it's her day, it's her big day. She's probably stressed enough by all the moving parts that she has to navigate and prepare and plan for. She didn't need her friends to be stressing her as well. Granted, she could have handled the conversation. Like, she could have had the conversation for us to manage our expectations. I remember our other friend was like really, really, really hurt and held that against her for a very long time. But I just let it go, because I was like, it's not about me. It's not my day and whatnot. And there's so many friendships like that where I just let things go, because I was like, it's not about me. It's the other person. I'm honestly just happy to be there and celebrating the day with them, because I really try not to center myself in people's experiences and life decisions and choices, But I think I have centered myself, like something shifted, and suddenly I've been centering myself. Like there has been an expectation that, hey, if we're friends, you also have to show up in a particular way. And that's what has led to my disappointment, and me acting out of turn. So I think I need to go back to that carefree person who is friends with people, but it's not the end of the world if they aren't behaving in a particular way that I expect, right? If someone chooses not to make me their bridesmaid, for instance, it's not the end of the world. It would be the end of the world for Sma. But yeah, like, it's not the end of the world. My love continues. It takes nothing away from me. I'm just gonna be enjoying the fact that I'm in their lives, and that they saw it fit to invite me to celebrate their special moment. But I think when I center myself then, or when I'm so involved that I suddenly have expectations about how they should show up, I get disappointed when that doesn't happen. And so, I'm letting go of that. In return, I'm freeing myself of always having to be there, for people. And it's okay to be selfish. And that's exactly where I'm going to live now, So I don't know what that looks like. It will be uncomfortable because, like I said, I have prided myself about being a good friend. But yeah, it's time that I become selfish, I think I've done it to a certain extent in my family. I did have a conversation with my mom at some point about being able to put me first, and being able to live comfortably and not always make sacrifices for the family, which left me unhappy, at whatever cost type situation. Things I've done for many years, but eventually I had to make that decision, and my mom understood and she supported me, which was unexpected, but also such a relief, So I think I need to do this with friends as well and see what my life looks like at the end of this year, when I turn all that energy towards myself. And I know it sounds counterproductive because I've written posts about, part of having good friends is being a good friend for yourself, and also how I normally cope with a difficult situation or phase. Like right now I'm in a difficult phase, right? And I think my dog is to a large extent helping me navigate that, because it's something outside of myself that I get to tend to and look after, as opposed to ruminating over the fact that certain areas in my life aren't going well and stress about that. Showing up for my friends was in a way similar, because I got to find joy in being there for my friends and sharing in their joyous moments as well, as opposed to sitting at home and beating myself over the fact that my business is not doing well, for instance, or I'm strapped for cash, or I'm worried about, how I'm going to cover things and my future and those sort of things. That's what I loved about friendship, because it really did interrupt that thought process and got me out of my mind to really be there for other people. And in so doing, life didn't suck, because now it was filled with all these series of events that brought me so much joy. But now, stepping away from that, I don't know what that's going to look like. But maybe it means I will create joy in other areas of my life. If work sucks, then I'm going to create joy in other, more personal areas outside of work. One thing I do know, though, is that I am joy personified. Like, I hype up everything. And I enjoy making a big deal out of everything, because I make everything seem like a party, like I celebrate it. And I can recognize that I carry that within myself. There's no one who creates that for me. Like, I do that for myself. I will make an event out of breakfast, or like hype myself up over the most average run ever, or like a Hyrox race that is so average. but I'm gonna have so much fun and like hype it up and dress cute and. So I think I need to do that more so that I don't feel disgruntled or dissatisfied when people aren't showing up in the way that I expect or in the ways that I feel like I show up, So I can just turn all that energy towards myself. And to be quite honest, I am worried about, what that's going to look like or feel, because I can already sense a discomfort, right, about this new identity that I've decided to embrace, which is to be selfish and to be in my villain era. And by the way, that doesn't mean that I want to go around hurting people deliberately. I think it was a lot learning recently that I'm also just as capable of causing harm to the people I care about as anyone. And yeah, that was a really uncomfortable truth. But I think being in my villain era has nothing to do with causing harm to people or just being bitchy for no reason. But it's about putting myself first, and not always being a saint. I can't even say it's wanting to be liked by people or whatever, but it's just I've got to put me first. There was something I wanted to say, but now I've forgotten, about this whole journey I'm on. I'm curious to see what, that's going to look like by the end of the year, where I've said no to everyone else and yes to me, like yes to me. Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, like I said, but I'm really excited for this journey actually. And yeah, let's see what this looks like. I'm excited. I'll journal about it. Anyway, this is the end of today's podcast. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really do appreciate each and every one of you. I see you downloading. I see you listening, leaving comments. I appreciate each and every action that you take to boost this podcast. I can't wait to make it better for you, to make it, to have, conversations with all my favorite people. I really, really cannot wait for that part, but I just need to get my life in order first. For now, thank you so much for joining me. This is the end. Cheers. Bye.